James Elliott Williams was 16 years old when he walked into a Navy recruiting office in South Carolina in the summer of 1947. He was too young to enlist, and he knew it. So he did what desperate teenagers do when they want something badly enough. He convinced a county clerk to alter his birth certificate, adding a year to his age. Before we dive in, smash that like button and subscribe with the bell on so you never miss a legend. On August 8th, 1947, Williams became a sailor, not because he was running from something, but because he was running toward something. The Navy, he would later say, became his second mom and daddy. For a kid from Fort Mill, South Carolina, who'd grown up in Darlington and graduated from St. John's High School, the military offered structure, purpose, and a path forward that small-town life couldn't provide. He claimed Cherokee descent, which made him part of a small but significant group. By the time his career ended, Williams would become one of only 32 Native Americans to receive the Medal of Honor. But in 1947, standing in that recruiting station with his falsified documents, he was just another teenage kid looking for a chance to prove himself. The early years were typical of enlisted Navy life in the post-World War II era. Williams completed basic training at Naval Training Center San Diego, then began the long, unglamorous process of learning what it meant to be a good sailor. He served aboard destroyers and various naval vessels throughout the 1950s, including a deployment to Korea aboard the USS Douglas H. Fox from November 1950 through June 1952. It was during the Korean War that Williams first got a taste of small boat operations. He was detached from the destroyer to take raiding parties into North Korea on small boats from March through June of 1952. Those missions, navigating hostile waters in nimble craft under enemy fire, planted something in him. A preference for fast, dangerous work over the monotony of large ship operations. But being a good sailor wasn't easy for Williams at first. There's a story he told later in life about learning discipline the hard way. An old chief petty officer pulled him aside after Williams had struggled with following orders he disagreed with. The chief told him something simple but profound. Son, you gotta learn to take orders, even if you disagree with them. That's the first step to being a good sailor and a good leader. If you can't take orders now, you certainly won't be respected when you give them later. Williams took that lesson to heart. From that moment on, he said, he had the sharpest knife and the shiniest shoes in the Navy. He threw himself into being the kind of sailor others could count on, the kind who showed up, did the work, and didn't complain. For the next 19 years, he served on 10 different ships steadily, advancing through the enlisted ranks to become a boatswain's mate first class. But there was one thing Williams couldn't do, no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't pass the advancement exam to become a chief petty officer. He took that test multiple times, and each time he fell short. By 1966, at 36 years old, Williams was facing the reality that his Navy career would end without achieving the rank he'd worked toward for nearly 2 decades. He had 20 years in, which meant he could retire with a pension. He'd already accepted a job with the U.S. Marshal's office back in South Carolina. His wife Elaine and their 5 children were waiting for him to come home for good. Most sailors in his position would have counted down their final months aboard some safe assignment, coasting toward retirement. But Williams didn't want to coast. He wanted one last chance to prove that a senior enlisted man had something more to give. He wanted to show that he had, as he put it, something else between the ears, besides his ability to chip paint and salute. When the opportunity came to volunteer for duty in Vietnam, specifically for the River Patrol Force, Williams jumped at it. His friends probably thought he was crazy. Vietnam in 1966 was heating up fast, and river patrol duty was among the most dangerous assignments the Navy offered. The casualty rate for patrol boat river crews was running at about 6% per month. Do the math on that over a year-long tour, and nearly 3 out of 4 PBR sailors could expect to be killed or wounded. But Williams saw it differently. He saw it as his opportunity. In May 1966, boatswain's mate First Class James Elliott Williams reported to River Squadron 5 in Vietnam, where he was assigned as the boat captain of Patrol Boat River 105, call sign PBR 105. This was the job Williams had been waiting his entire career to do. To understand what Williams was getting into, you have to understand the boats and the mission. The Patrol Boat River, or PBR as everyone called it, was unlike anything else in the Navy's inventory. It wasn't designed for open ocean warfare or deep water operations. The PBR was built for one specific purpose: to take the fight to the Viet Cong in the shallow, weed-choked rivers and canals of South Vietnam. The Mark II version of the PBR, which is what Williams commanded, was 32 feet long with a fiberglass hull. That's important. Fiberglass, not steel. These boats were essentially armed pleasure craft, based on designs from a boatyard in Bellingham, Washington that normally built recreational boats. The hull was light, which made the PBR incredibly fast and maneuverable, but it also meant the boat had almost no armor protection. If you got hit, you got hurt. The PBR was powered by twin 220 horsepower Detroit diesel engines connected to Jacuzzi water jet propulsion pumps. Yes, Jacuzzi, the same. Company that makes hot tubs. Those jet pumps were revolutionary for riverine warfare because they meant no exposed propellers. The boat could operate in as little as 9 inches of water at full speed, could execute impossibly tight turns, and could come to a complete stop within a boat length. Maximum speed was over 25 knots, which doesn't sound that impressive until you're doing it on a narrow river with thick vegetation on both banks and the possibility of enemy ambush around every bend. These boats could go where larger Navy vessels couldn't dream of reaching. The armament was substantial for such a small craft. Up front in the bow turret, twin 50 caliber M2HB, Browning heavy machine guns. At the stern, a single 50 caliber machine gun, a midships, an M60 machine gun, and a Mark 18 40mm grenade launcher. The crew also carried M16 rifles, a 12-gauge shotgun, an M79 handheld grenade launcher, fragmentation grenades, and 45 caliber pistols. A typical PBR crew consisted of 4 men: a first-class petty officer who served as boat captain, a gunner's mate, an engine man, and a seaman. Each crewman was cross-trained in the other's jobs because if someone went down in a firefight, the boat still had to function. Generally, PBRs operated in 2-boat patrols under the command of a patrol officer who rowed on one of the boats. The mission was part of Operation Game Warden, Task Force 116. The goal was to control the inland waterways of South Vietnam, particularly the Mekong Delta and the Rungsat Special Zone, which the Americans grimly nicknamed the Forest of Assassins. PBR crews would stop and search river traffic, looking for Viet Cong fighters, weapons shipments, and contraband. They'd insert and extract Navy SEAL teams for covert operations. They'd provide fire support for ground troops operating near the rivers. And most importantly, they'd disrupt the enemy's ability to use the rivers as supply lines. The statistics tell you how dangerous this work was. PBR units logged over 70,000 patrol hours per month on average. They were involved in approximately 80 firefights every month. Individual river divisions sometimes had casualty rates far higher than the overall average. River Division 531, the unit Williams would join, took B-40 rocket hits to 7 of their 10 assigned boats in a period of just 40 days. Think about that for a second. In a little over a month, 70% of their boats were hit by rockets. These weren't random encounters. The Viet Cong knew the rivers intimately. They knew every inlet, every canal, every ambush point. They'd fortify positions along the banks with heavy machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. They'd wait for the distinctive sound of PBR engines, then unleash coordinated fire from multiple positions at close range. The PBR crews fought back with aggression and tactical skill, but they paid a price. By the end of the war, 1 out of every 3 PBR sailors had been killed or wounded. The men who volunteered for this duty weren't looking for medals. They were looking for action, and they were looking to make a difference in a war that was increasingly being fought on the water. Williams arrived in May 1966 and immediately proved he belonged. On his first combat patrol on July 1st, 1966, just 2 months after reporting for duty, Williams encountered an enemy sampan during the early morning hours. He gave chase, taking his boat dangerously close to suspected enemy positions along the shore. When the sampan crew illuminated him and opened fire at close range, Williams engaged with devastating effect. Demonstrating impressive tactical seamanship and aggressive maneuvering, Williams not only survived the ambush but captured the sampan intact, along with a cache of intelligence documents that would prove valuable to U.S. forces. For that action, he earned his first Bronze Star with Combat Vi Device for Valor. 3 weeks later, he earned his second Bronze Star in a similar engagement. His superiors took notice. This wasn't just another boat captain grinding through his tour. This was someone with instincts, courage, and the ability to make split-second decisions under fire. In August 1966, Williams was promoted to patrol officer, placed in command of 2 PBRs. This was an assignment normally reserved for junior officers or chief petty officers. Williams described it as the proudest day of his life, prouder than any medal, prouder than any commendation, because being made a patrol officer meant the Navy trusted him. It meant they saw in him the leadership and tactical skill he'd been trying to prove he had for 2 decades. It gave him, finally, the chance to do his job at the highest level. And he was about to do it in the most extraordinary way imaginable. Share this video with a friend who loves history. Now, let's get back to the chaos. October 31st, 1966 was supposed to be an easy day. Williams and his crew aboard PBR 105, along with a second boat in their patrol, were assigned to a daytime operation on the Mekong River. After several nights of dangerous patrols in enemy controlled waters, this was meant to be a relatively relaxed mission. Williams himself described it as a relax and recreation patrol, nothing too heavy. They were just going to check a few boats coming down the river for contraband, make their presence known, and return to base. The Mekong Delta in late October was hot and humid, the kind of weather that makes you sweat just standing still. The two PBRs were, in Williams's words, just DD bopping down the river, cruising at moderate speed, scanning the waterway and the thick vegetation on both banks. The crew was alert but not expecting serious contact. Then, around mid-afternoon, the forward gunner on Williams's boat called out, "Two high-speed sampans crossing ahead of them." Williams and his crew had learned from experience that when you spotted sampans moving fast and crossing your path deliberately, it usually meant something. It often meant there were high-ranking Viet Cong officers aboard, which meant trouble. As soon as the Viet Cong spotted the American patrol boats, they opened fire. The two sampans split up, one heading for the north bank of the river, the other heading east. Williams made a split-second decision. His boat would pursue the northbound sampan while the other PBR went after the second one. The chase was short and brutal. Williams and his crew opened up with their 50 caliber machine guns, raking the enemy sampan with heavy fire before it could reach the relative safety of the riverbank. The sampan was sunk, its crew killed, one target down. Williams then turned his attention to the second sampan, which the other PBR was pursuing. That enemy boat had made a sharp turn into an 8-foot wide canal in front of a rice paddy. The canal was too narrow for the PBRs to follow directly, so Williams made another decision. If they couldn't follow into the canal, they'd go around and cut off the escape route. But when the two American boats entered the canal from a different angle, they discovered they hadn't cornered a single fleeing sampan. They'd sailed straight into a major Viet Cong staging area, what Williams called a beehive of enemy activity. Emerging from the canal, the PBRs found themselves facing 2 large junks and 8 additional sampans. Backing up this flotilla were fortified positions along both riverbanks, manned by Viet Cong fighters with automatic weapons, rocket-propelled grenades, and small arms. The Americans were outnumbered and, by any rational assessment, outgunned. A less experienced or less aggressive commander might have retreated, called for air support, and waited for helicopters to soften up the target before engaging. But Williams didn't retreat. He attacked. His reasoning was tactical and based on hard-earned experience. If he pulled back, the enemy would have time to disperse into the maze of canals and inlets that crisscrossed the delta. They'd escape with their boats, weapons, and supplies intact. The Americans would lose the opportunity to disrupt what was clearly a major enemy operation. So Williams ordered his 2 boats forward, directly into the enemy concentration. The PBRs opened fire with everything they had. The twin 50s and the bow turrets hammered away at the enemy boats and shoreline positions. The stern-mounted 50 calibers and ME-60 machine guns joined in. The grenade launchers pumped 40mm rounds into the enemy positions. The Viet Cong returned fire with devastating volume. Small arms fire, rocket-propelled grenades, and automatic weapons from the shore positions raked the American boats. Remember, these PBRs had fiberglass hulls with minimal armor protection. Rounds were punching through the sides of the boats. The crews were exposed on deck with only small ceramic armor shields on the gun mounts for protection. Williams, standing in the most exposed position as patrol officer, directed the fire and maneuvered both boats through the kill zone. He demonstrated what his Medal of Honor citation would later call unusual professional skill and indomitable courage. He wasn't just brave, he was tactically brilliant under pressure. As the battle developed, Williams realized from aerial observation reports that he'd stumbled into something even bigger than he initially thought. This wasn't just a staging area. This was a major enemy supply and troop movement, the kind of target that could shift the tactical situation in the Delta if it could be destroyed. Williams called for air support. 2 heavily armed UH-1B Huey helicopters from Helicopter Attack Squadron 3 responded to the call. But Williams didn't wait for them to arrive. He kept pressing the attack, maneuvering his boats close to shore to maintain fire superiority and prevent the enemy from repositioning. When the enemy tried to maneuver their boats to escape, Williams intercepted them. When enemy fighters on the shore tried to concentrate fire on one of the PBRs, Williams would maneuver to draw fire away from the damaged boat. He was everywhere at once, coordinating defensive fire, calling in helicopter strikes, directing the movement of both boats, and maintaining the initiative against a numerically superior force. The battle went on for 3 hours. 3 hours of sustained combat at close range. 3 hours of noise, chaos, smoke, and the constant possibility of a rocket propelled grenade ending everything in an instant. Williams and his crews burned through their ammunition at a furious rate. The boat's gun barrels grew hot from continuous firing. The crews reloaded again and again, mechanically, while rounds cracked past them and splashed in the water around their boats. Williams himself was hit during the battle. A round struck him near his right kidney, a painful wound that could have been fatal if it had been a few inches in a different direction. He refused to leave his position, refused to break off the engagement. His crews looked to him for leadership, and he wasn't going to let them down. When the helicopters arrived, Williams coordinated their gun runs with his boat movements, using the aerial firepower to hit enemy positions that he couldn't effectively engage from the water. The Hueys made multiple passes, their door gunners and rocket pods adding to the carnage Williams had initiated from the river. As twilight approached and visibility began to fade, Williams made one final push. Despite dwindling ammunition supplies, despite his wound, despite the exhaustion of his crews, he ordered the boats forward one more time to ensure the enemy was completely routed. By the time the guns finally fell silent, the results were staggering. Williams and his two-boat patrol, just 10 men total, had accounted for the destruction or damage of 65 enemy boats. They had inflicted an estimated 1,000 to 1,200 casualties on Viet Cong personnel. They'd disrupted a major enemy logistics operation that could have supplied Viet Cong operations throughout the Delta for weeks. Not one of Williams's crew members was killed, though several were wounded along with Williams himself. Both PBRs, despite taking multiple hits, remained operational enough to return to base under their own power. Williams later said he'd never forget that day, no matter how hard he tried. His crew, most of them teenagers and 20-year-olds, had followed him into hell and come out the other side. Williams himself, the 36-year-old old man to his young crew, had proven something he'd been trying to prove his entire career, that he had what it took, that he could lead men under fire, that he deserved the trust the Navy had placed in him. For his actions on October 31st, 1966, Boatswain's Mate First Class James Elliott Williams was nominated for the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military award for valor in combat. But the nomination process takes time, and Williams still had months left on his tour in Vietnam. He wasn't done adding to his record. On January 9th, 1967, just over 2 months after the October battle, Williams was on patrol near My Tho when the Navy dredge Jamaica Bay struck a mine and began sinking rapidly in the Mekong River. Williams immediately directed PBR-105 toward the stricken vessel and supervised his crew in rescuing survivors. They pulled 2 men directly from the sinking dredge and saved 5 more who were struggling in the rapidly ebbing tide current, exhausted and in danger of drowning. After administering first aid, Williams heard metallic tapping coming from within the hull of the sinking dredge. Someone was trapped inside. Williams maneuvered his boat to the dredge and personally dove into the murky water to free a trapped crewman from a jammed hatch. He saved that man's life at great personal risk, despite hazardous conditions and the very real possibility that the dredge could have fully capsized while he was inside. For this action, which involved no combat with armed enemies, Williams received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism at risk of life. 6 days later, on January 15, 1967, Williams earned the Navy Cross, the second highest award for valor in the U.S. military. As patrol officer of a 3-boat combat patrol, Williams interdicted a major enemy supply movement across the Nam Thon branch of the Mekong River. His patrol was immediately taken under intense hostile fire from fortified positions and from fighters along the riverbanks. After coordinating Vietnamese artillery support and U.S. Air Force airstrikes, Williams courageously led his 3 PBRs back into the hazardous river to investigate and destroy the enemy forces. The resulting engagement destroyed 9 enemy vessels and 7 enemy structures ashore. Williams personally sustained painful injuries during the battle, but refused to leave his position until the mission was complete. This was his 3rd Purple Heart. By the time Williams retired from the Navy in April 1967, after exactly 20 years of service, he had become something unique in naval history. He was the most decorated enlisted sailor the U.S. Navy had ever produced, the only enlisted man to earn all 3 of the top combat valor awards, the Medal of Honor, the Navy Cross, and the Silver Star. In fact, only 7 men in Navy history had ever earned all three, and 6 of them were World War II officers. Williams was the seventh, and the only enlisted man in that group. His complete awards included the Medal of Honor, the Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit. With Combat V device, the Navy and Marine Corps Medal with Gold Star, 3 Bronze Stars with V device, 3 Purple Hearts, the Navy Commendation Medal with V device, the Combat Action Ribbon, and multiple campaign and service medals. He also received several foreign decorations from the governments of South Korea and South Vietnam. But here's the thing Williams always emphasized when people asked him about the medals. He didn't seek them out, he didn't covet them. He was just doing his job to the best of his ability, taking care of his crew, following the instincts and training that 20 years in the Navy had built into him. A retired Rear Admiral who commanded Williams in Vietnam said it best. Willie did not seek awards. He did not covet getting them. We did not seek to make him a hero. The circumstances of time and place and the enemy's presence did that. I know through personal investigation of each incident that he never placed his crew nor his patrol boats in danger, without first ensuring the risk was calculated and that surprise was on his side. He always had the presence of mind not to endanger friendly villages. He inspired us all, junior and senior alike. It was my greatest honor to have served with the man who truly led us all with his example of unselfish devotion to duty. Williams retired from the Navy without achieving the rank of Chief Petty Officer that he'd tried so hard to earn through the advancement exam, but the Navy wasn't done with him. In 1977, 10 years after his retirement, the Navy made Williams an honorary Chief Boatswain's Mate and made him go through the traditional chief initiation and all. It was recognition that Williams had earned that rank through actions, even if he'd never passed the written test. On May 14th, 1968, more than a year after Williams had retired, he was presented with the Medal of Honor by President Lyndon B. Johnson during the dedication ceremony of the Hall of Heroes at the Pentagon. Williams stood there in his civilian clothes, surrounded by his family, as the president placed the medal around his neck and read the citation aloud. Williams was stunned when he learned he was receiving the Medal of Honor. I was just doing a job to the best of my ability, he said. I wasn't out there trying to win medals. Events just happened. The 105 and the crew, we were always into something or other. We weren't looking for it. That humility was characteristic of Williams throughout his life. He never promoted himself as a hero, never used his medals for personal gain or attention. When people thanked him for his service, he'd redirect the conversation to his shipmates, to the other PBR sailors, to the crews who fought and died in Vietnam's rivers. You gotta stop and think about your shipmates, he'd say. That's what makes you a great person and a great leader. Taking care of each other. You've got to think team. It takes a team to win. Any battle? Not an individual. After retiring from the Navy, Williams went to work for the Wackenhut Corporation, a private security company, but he didn't stay there long. In 1969, he was appointed as a United States Marshal in South Carolina, the job he'd been planning to take when he first decided to retire from the Navy. Williams thrived in law enforcement. He became an instructor at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. He also served at U.S. Marshal Service Headquarters in Washington, D.C., where he eventually took over all field activities for the entire nation. He retired from federal government service in 1983, having built a second successful career in civilian life. Throughout those years, Williams remained connected to the Navy and to the community of veterans. He'd speak at events when asked, always emphasizing teamwork and leadership over individual heroism. He'd visit Navy bases and talk with young sailors about what it meant to serve. He'd participate in memorial ceremonies for fallen PBR sailors, making sure their sacrifices weren't forgotten. Williams married Elaine Weaver on December 20th, 1949, in Darlington, South Carolina. They were together for nearly 50 years. They had 5 children and 8 grandchildren. Elaine managed the household during Williams's long deployments to Korea and Vietnam, raising their children largely on her own for extended periods. The family's resilience and support were essential to Williams's ability to serve. On October 13th, 1999, James Elliott Williams died of a heart attack in a hospital in Florence, South Carolina. He was 68 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Florence National Cemetery in Florence, South Carolina. The funeral was attended by his immediate family, hundreds of fellow veterans, and active duty military personnel who came to pay their respects to a legend. The Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, speaking at the funeral, said, "We will forever be grateful for the leadership and commitment he showed his sailors. Petty Officer Williams was an amazing sailor, but Williams's legacy didn't end with his burial. On December 11th, 2004, 5 years after his death, the United States Navy commissioned the USS James E. Williams, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. The ship's sponsor at the commissioning ceremony was Elaine Williams, his widow. It was a rare honor for an enlisted sailor to have a major warship named after him. The destroyer, USS James E. Williams, hull number DDG 95, serves today as part of the Atlantic Fleet, homeported at Naval Station Norfolk, Virginia. It's equipped with the Aegis combat system and supports multi-mission roles including integrated air and missile defense, anti-submarine warfare, and anti-surface warfare. The ship is deployed to the European theater multiple times and participated in numerous exercises enhancing Allied interoperability. Every sailor who serves aboard the USS James E. Williams learns about the man whose name is on the hull. They learn about the 16-year-old kid who falsified his birth certificate to join the Navy. They learn about the sailor who spent 19 years trying to become a chief and never quite made it through the exam. They learn about the 36-year-old boatswain's mate who volunteered for the most dangerous duty in Vietnam when he could have coasted to a safe retirement. And they learn about October 31st, 1966, about the 3-hour battle on the Mekong River, about the patrol officer who led 2 small boats against overwhelming odds and somehow brought all his crew members home alive, about the most decorated enlisted sailor in United States Navy history who never sought the medals but earned every single one of them through courage, skill, and an absolute refusal to abandon his men. Under fire, Williams never called himself a hero, but here's what he did say, and it might be the most important thing to remember about him. The proudest day of my life had nothing to do with medals, ribbons, citations. It was when they made me a patrol officer. That position was held only by chiefs and officers. It showed the trust the Navy had placed in me. I always wanted the opportunity to show what I could do. This Vietnam thing was it for me. The Navy gave me the chance to do my job. James Elliott Williams got his chance, and he made the most of it. He led with courage. He fought with skill. He inspired his crews through example rather than words. And when the shooting started on that October afternoon in 1966, he didn't hesitate. He didn't retreat. He didn't calculate the odds or worry about his own safety. He did what great leaders do. He took care of his people and he completed the mission. That's the legacy. That's what made James Elliott Williams the most insane river patrol sailor of the Vietnam War. James Williams walked away with the Medal of Honor and a legendary legacy. Was he the craziest sailor to ever live? Let me know below, hit like, and if you haven't yet, subscribe and ring that bell. See you in the next one.